pretty blunt. I said, you know, it's time that your government starts showing some love to Saskatchewan and Alberta. The last Prime Minister showed no love.
This is something that we will get an indication of very quickly of whether or not he's willing to turn the page on the past 10 years and move forward in a different direction. And I'm hopeful that he does.
We very much believe that there's a path forward with this new Prime Minister and whoever is in his cabinet for him, and his government to change course from a policy perspective.
I certainly encourage them all, Premier Smith, Premier Moe, and I believe that they're on board for this, to work together and to push back strongly on any kind of separatist sentiment.
The issue of national unity is in the spotlight again as a referendum on Alberta separation was given new life by Premier Danielle Smith this week. We also heard from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who said he hopes Prime Minister Mark Carney will do more to show some love to the prairie provinces. It comes as new numbers from Nanos research show most Canadians believe that Mark Carney's government will have a positive impact on Canadian unity. According to the polls, 7 in 10 Canadians believe that the Prime Minister will have a positive or somewhat positive impact on unity among Canadians. Regionally, there's a lack of that optimism in the prairie provinces, where only about 55% of Canadians think that he will have that positive impact. Joining me now to dig a little deeper into the numbers is Nick Nanos. He's the CEO and Chief Data Scientist with Nanos Research. Hi, Nick. Welcome back to Power Play.
Great to join you.
So this new poll that you have out today for our show has some really interesting insights into how Canadians are feeling about unity in this country. Tell us what the numbers are telling you.
It's quite striking, Mike. You know, we asked Canadians for CTV News and Power Play what they thought the contribution that a Mark Carney government would be on national unity, whether it be positive or negative. And what's interesting is that when we ask Canadians this question, a pretty strong majority believe that he will have a positive or somewhat positive impact on the unity of the country. It's about 70% or thereabouts. So it's a pretty big number right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you dig into those numbers, there's a regional divide. And I sort of flash back to what Doug Ford, the Ontario Premier, said, that the previous government really wasn't showing any love for Saskatchewan and Alberta, and he actually said it was quite the opposite. So we have heard talk of a referendum on separation in Alberta, and that seems to be where the hope in these numbers isn't as strong. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. You know, the numbers are lower, where there are about 7 out of every 10 Canadians. That number drops to just a little over 1 out of every 2 people that live in the prairie provinces. So still a majority, but lower than the rest of Canada. The other thing that's actually quite striking is you have to think of it this way, Mike. You know, the Liberals got around 43% support or thereabouts in the popular vote. More than 7 out of every 10 think that there'll be a positive or somewhat positive impact on national unity, which means there are some conservative voters who believe that Mark Carney will be good for national unity. But the reality is that the proof is in the pudding. What this speaks to is that there is hope currently on his impact on the state of the Federation, and it's too early to tell whether that hope will convert into reality, but there is an opportunity right now for Mark Carney and his new government.
And Nick, what I find interesting is that some of this hope isn't really reflected as much in, you know, how many Liberals were elected in those areas. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that sort of interplay didn't really show up in terms of numbers of MPs in the prairie provinces, but is showing up as hope right now.
Well, you know, we look at the numbers in the last federal election, and let's face it, the prairies are the conservative heartland. You know, that's where most of the conservative caucus comes from. You know, the Conservatives are extremely strong in the prairies. But, you know, what this does show is that even if you're in the prairies and even if you're conservative-minded, you're at a point in time where you likely believe that it's important for the country to start to work better, for the Federation to be stronger, especially in the face of the threat from Donald Trump. And I think what we're seeing is a situation where there is an opportunity right now for the Mark Carney government to engage in national unity, to bring the premiers from different provinces together, including Alberta and Saskatchewan, where a lot of this separatist sentiment exists, in order to show that Canada can work.
Yeah, and one of those opportunities might be the First Minister's meeting, which will be in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, on June the 2nd. Prime Minister Mark Carney says he will be there. How much do you think is riding on that meeting for Canadians to feel better about national unity? Not just the fact that he's going, but any kind of result out of it and what we will hear from those premiers coming out of it?
I think people are going to specifically focus not just on, Premier Ford and Legault. They're going to want to hear and see what the Premier of Saskatchewan and Alberta, what they say about the meeting and coming out of the meeting, and whether there is something concrete. I think for a lot of Canadians, they've had enough talk. They want to see action. They want to see action from the federal government. They want to see action from the provincial governments, and they want to see those governments to work together in order to make our economy more resilient, in order to focus on prosperity and jobs, and also in order to navigate with the Trump administration.
So we have Mark Carney also forming his cabinet next week. How important is it for him to have some sort of regional representation from the prairies, even though they don't have a lot of MPs to choose from in that cabinet, as a bit of an olive branch, but also to try and really improve national unity? How important is that?
It's critically important, Mike. And the thing is, this is all about signaling. Not only will he need to have some individuals from the West, Alberta and Saskatchewan, in his cabinet, he's going to actually have to give them some real responsibilities. The fact of the matter is he can't have them in cabinet and then have them as juniors or people that are not significant players in the government, because he needs to demonstrate that every part of the country has an important role in his cabinet, and that everyone are players, and that they're focused and working together for the betterment of the country. So it won't be enough just to tick a box and put a body from Alberta and Saskatchewan, Manitoba into cabinet. It's going to be important that he sends a signal in terms of them having also substantive responsibilities in terms of the future of the government and the future of the country.
Yeah, especially if he wants to do something about that national unity. Nick Nanos, the CEO and Chief Data Scientist from Nanos Research, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.